Welcome to Week 3 of college football. What did we find out during Week 2? A few teams made statements to their conferences and to the rest of the Football Bowl subdivision. The Pacific 12 is soaring while the Southeastern Conference is faltering, or so it appears. Let us take a look back and see who made those statements. Texas managed to do what no other out-of-conference opponent to Bryant-Denny Stadium has managed to do since 2007: beat Alabama. The Longhorns made Alabama's offense too dependent on long completions by limiting the Tide's rushing attack. So, for how long will fans outside the Lone Star State have to hear Texas fans say, "We're back"? The Buffaloes defeated the Cornhuskers for the third consecutive time. That is the longest winning streak in the series since Colorado defeated Nebraska from 1956 through 58. Deion Sanders has turned Colorado from an interesting preseason topic of discussion into a nationally respected team. Colorado has one more out-of-conference game before we will find out if the Buffaloes are a serious contender in the Pacific 12. There are no meeting of any ranked teams for this week. 6 ranked teams will play in-conference games this week. We have already seen the first head coach terminated. Unlike last season with its firings in September for on-field insufficiencies, the first coach to be shown the door is due to off-field indiscretions. What appeared to be a meager season for Michigan State before September now looks like it might turn into a train wreck. Maybe the return of Mark D'Antonio can keep the team from imploding? Southern California, a week after winning the Mountain West Conference Championship, successfully completed the first step toward securing the Pacific 12's final championship by defeating Stanford. After 2 weeks, the derision directed toward the Southeastern Conference has increased. Records of 1-4 versus the Atlantic Coast Conference and 0-1 versus the Big 12 have sullied the reputation of the SEC. Meanwhile, the acclamations of the Pacific 12 standing out as the strongest FBS conference have grown louder. The Pac-12 has a record of 19-3 in out-in-conference games. The Pac-12 has won both games versus the Big 10 and 3 of its 4 contests versus the Big 12. So what is the only conference with a winning record versus the Pac-12 so far? The SEC, with a record of 2-1. Maybe declaring which conference is the greatest after only 2 weeks of games is trickier than taking huge leaps based on a small sample size and personal bias. Anyway, we will not find out much more about the presumed superiority of the Pac-12 this week. 5 members will host FCS opponents. The only matchup of the Pac-12 versus another Power 5 conference is Washington traveling to Michigan State, who, as previously mentioned, will be without its head coach. The Huskies defeated the Spartans last season in Seattle. That victory increased their lead in the all-time series 3-1. The SEC will have a few opportunities to reverse the growing perception of its decline. Arkansas will host BYU. The Razorbacks won the only previous meeting last season. Another SEC team, Missouri, will host a member of the Big 12, Kansas State. K-State won last season in the sole matchup since the Tigers left the Big 12. Missouri leads the overall series 59-34 with 5 ties, as well as in games played in Columbia with a record of 30, 17, and 2. Ole Miss will try to improve the SEC's struggling record versus the ACC this season by hosting Georgia Tech. The Rebels lead the series 3-2 after beating the Yellow Jackets in Atlanta last September. That is all for this week. Enjoy the matchups. Who knows? They might actually surprise us with some upsets. Check back next week for your shot of insight on college football with a heavy chaser of snark.